Welcome back, everybody. Santa Fe Fast Week's Fashion Video Podcast. I'm really excited to have Sheldon online with us. Sheldon, you're in California?
Yes, sir. Los Angeles, California.
Love it. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm from Seattle, Washington. I am a musician and photographer, and I've been working professionally for the last 15 years as a photographer, and I am absolutely in love with my craft.
Fantastic. So we're going to talk a little bit about fashion photography and the value add. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the clients you're working with and some of the projects you got going on?
So right now I'm doing a rebrand for a company called Sweet Taboo. I just did a pitch for them where we're redesigning the entire idea of how their company is going to look overall. And then in addition to that, I've got a bridal company that I'm working with, and they're based out of Hawaii. My job right now is to create their entire social media for the next 2 years, which is really exciting. They're called DPD Bridal. It's a Filipino wedding bridal company, and it's very like artsy, high-end Filipino inspired wedding dresses, and each one is like $5,000 minimum, which is really
Okay.
And then a smattering of other individual fun clients who are just, I need to look amazing, build my portfolio. I shot a fashion show for Cohesive 10 recently, and they're going to be flying me to Vegas to shoot the rest of their events, and I'm pretty excited.
Well, hopefully I'll see you in Vegas because I go to Magic in August. I used to live in Vegas. Now August is obviously a very hot time of year in Vegas, but hopefully we can connect. So you talk about branding or rebranding. Can you tell us what that process was like working with the client and coming up with what that looks like going forward?
Absolutely. I'll stick to Sweet Taboo because I've been working with them for almost 6 years now. Rebranding my client means, one, a lot of getting to know them personally. My first question to Chantel Pierre, the owner of Sweet Taboo, was, what got you into fashion? And she went on to say essentially that like she never really saw the style that she wanted to see for herself and for others, and she started creating this brand around creative freedom and expression of self through like vibrant color and being edgy and tough texture and high quality. So that's where we started. And then coming up with the color palette was another thing. And then coming up with what environments do you want to be seen in? Because you've got these clients that you're after, and we decided that we would base the locations on where they see themselves. So high-end homes was number one. Anywhere that felt super swanky, where people go like, I am an artist with a giant on the wall, off the couch. That was the place. And then when you step outside, green palm trees, pool, that whole life. Her pieces are starting around $400 to $500. So we wanted to make sure that the essence of luxury was represented in every piece of this. And then lastly, really simplifying it to a lastly, we had a discussion about where we see her brand in 7 to 8 years and where she's trying to transform so that we have a clear pathway from promotion to promotion so that it's a seamless flow. And a lot of people just deal with one shoot at a time. They're like, oh, cool, let's take some cute pictures, but they're not thinking about the trajectory and the story of the company. So I've taken that on with all of my clients. I don't like just shooting for shooting's sake. I really like that it's meaningful. It helps tell their personal story and that it grows over time.
That's interesting. I was reading an article about how things have really changed. Like luxury brands could really tell it, like drive the narrative, if you will, or the story. And now you're having more of these smaller brands and TikTok influencers, stuff like that, almost like pushing out the brand on their own. And so do you find that smaller brands can pivot faster than bigger brands, or do you find a way where, like what you're doing with photography, cutting through all the noise of, because obviously on TikTok and Instagram, I mean, there's a lot of beautiful models and great fashion, but building up that backstory, have you talked to your client about what that looks like?
So there are interesting sides. With larger brands, they've got all these analytics, they've got gigantic teams and lawyers and this, that, and the other. So in the conversation about pivoting, they both move slower and faster. If an individual entrepreneur wants to make a completely new piece today, all they have to do is make it, put it out, and that's very exciting. But when it comes to volume, they suffer because usually there's one of them and maybe one seamstress. While that larger company might have to jump through a lot of hoops to get a design approved, and it might take months and months, once they do press the button, they've got an entire system where they can crank that out globally. And I'd say it's faster and slower depending on which aspect of delivery that we're talking about.
Interesting. So besides doing my fashion stuff, I'm helping a friend of mine. He's a doctor here in town. And he's doing an energy drink, which is very competitive. And we're talking about the next generation of energy drinks. And the kind of reason I bring it up is with let's say the energy drink market, you have the hero, is the hero the consumer or is the hero the energy drink, the brand? And so when it comes to fashion, and I think, being, music or film or energy drink or fashion, you do have to cut through the noise, and there's a lot of competition. So do you position your designer and you're doing these lifestyle photo shoots, is the hero the consumer of the fashion, or is the hero the brand, or how do you go about telling that story of the brand for your client?
That is a great question, and it depends on who I'm working for. So with DPD Bridal, their whole idea is uplifting. So it's actually, I misspoke earlier, it's Black and Filipino, and she's kind of using Afrocentrism with traditional Filipino wear in a high-end way in wedding dresses. So her hero really is the culture of the client and finding every possible way that she can find unique pieces of their cultural expression and go, I made you a how can I put this? Like an honoring piece to give to you. It's a gift to you that represents all of you. As opposed to Sweet Taboo, on the one hand, it is very much about the designer's creative expression and what she wants to see, and then finding people who love that thing. So the clothes really shine, and then the clothing kind of find their owner, so to speak. Whereas with DPD, complete opposite. She's looking at everyone else's lives and interests and going, how do I combine all of these things into this beautiful dress?
That's interesting. So how did you kind of get into fashion photography? What was that journey like?
My journey into fashion photography started off on Facebook, like most photographers that I know anyways. I was on forums looking for any model to work with, and it just started off as pretty faces. I actually had the perception that shooting models was only female, number one, and number two, the pretty skinny chick with abs in a bikini. I quickly got very bored with that. And I started exploring more about what does fashion mean. And what I've landed on and started to see from the designers that I've met, from the models who really see it as a craft and not just being pretty, is that it's constantly pushing the boundaries of creative expression. And whether that be in clothing, whether that be in the story you're trying to tell about a certain life circumstance, because I find that fashion is a great way to talk about social circumstances, and people often ignore that and how important that is. And what I've loved is actually being a part of helping tell those stories. But I digress. How I got in, so I was shooting the models, and then it kept developing into me meeting interesting people and them saying, hey, do you do this? Do you do that? And they would invite me into red carpets. They would ask if I could shoot for their brand. There was a makeup company that ended up saying, hey, we saw some of your work with models. Do you shoot products? And I ended up shooting products with them. And after about 4 years of people inviting me in, I started reaching out to people directly and saying, hi, my name is Sheldon Botler. Here's my portfolio. I would love to work with you. Um, and that's been the most fruitful because I find that people don't want to look for photographers. They wish one would just fall into their lap because no one has the bandwidth to sift through 800 photographers' pages just to find the one that they get along with, number one, that provides a good product and that can be trusted. So I've taken a silver platter approach these days where I
Mm-hmm.
pushing myself into people's faces and they go, thank God, we need to.
Right. Well, it's a couple. It's interesting. So yesterday I did a photo shoot. There's a gentleman here, Alan Osterholtz. He does a lot of light painting photography. It's very interesting. And so the woman we were photographing, she actually lived in California for quite a bit, and then she moved back here to New Mexico. And she wants to get into doing style, stylizing the models and the fashion and stuff like that. And New Mexico, although it's very huge in the film industry, Netflix is here, and the film industry is very big. I think the modeling scene lacks a bit. But what advice would you give to someone like that? I mean, do you typically work with a stylist when you're doing your shoots? What is that? How does that work?
My favorite shoots have always been with the stylist. And one of my favorite here in Los Angeles, you can tell your friend this, is a man named Dylan Ty. If there's any opportunity to share his info, I can tag
That'd be
him.
great.
He is absolutely fantastic. And then also styling houses. There are warehouses full of rentable clothing that look outstanding. And there are also websites where you can rent high-end clothing. So you don't necessarily need a stylist these days because people have recognized that they can go direct to consumer now.
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend that if she's looking for a stylist or wanting to really build out a set, actually this to any model trying to create a more grand idea. One, up the concept, write it down and really have a detail. I want to shoot in something that looks like X and make a Pinterest board with samples. Then pick a location. I want it to be in a space like this and come up with a little budget to at least make sure that that can happen. And once you start reaching out to people and get them excited with a fully fleshed out game plan, oftentimes they'll do it for free. The thing that gets models caught up is they go, will you shoot me? I want to look like this. And the person goes, how might you contribute? And they go, I look good. And they go, so does everything. Go away.
Right.
Really having a solid game plan and pitching it as a dream project that others would like to be a part of and being an active participant in the production of that shoot, which will also enhance your performance on the day of. If I'm now speaking to you models, if you're listening, your participation in a project is one, dependent on your talent and ability to just adapt to any circumstance, but also to be a contributor to telling a particular story. Your body is now an artistic tool in the same way that a clarinet helps play music and interpret notes. You are now interpreting clothing. You're interpreting a lifestyle. You're interpreting someone else's vision through your movement. And I want all of you to really get in touch with the fact that modeling is a craft. It is not just showing up and being pretty. And that makes it fun because some days your look becomes stagnant the moment you wake up. You're you. But the more you can play with what you usually wouldn't do or how you usually wouldn't be, you now become an instrument. And that's a gift to everyone.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, acting is such a big thing out here, and I try to let models know that you are acting. And I was watching this one podcast. I forget he's a very famous fashion photographer, and he goes back to the early days before photography was fashion illustration. So they would do a show in New York, and there'd be a fashion illustrator, and then of course you had photography, and now you have videography, and some of the benefits of fashion shows is what designers want to see is they want to see the clothing in motion. And obviously photography can capture a little bit of that, the dress is flowing. And I think going back to modeling product, they could be playing with the dress or whatnot, or the jacket and creating some flow there. But the advent of videography, and I'm kind of pushing more towards like these fashion films, because I think with runway shows, I'm doing this whole thing with like Fashion Behind the Curtain. I think I talked to you about on the phone a little bit. where the cool kids are kind of behind the curtain and everybody's kind of just waiting to see this show, but you're still limited to the space of this fashion show, if you will. And with fashion film, photography, and even maybe, I don't know if you do this or not, but with your designers, documenting the behind the scenes stuff, because a lot of times that's a lot of fun too, documenting that process of bringing this fashion to life. So have you delved much into videography or working with videographers out in LA?
So I do have experience doing videography, and I've enjoyed it the times that I do. I'm most often called upon to do photography. And I completely get what you mean, because photos, they're beautiful and they capture these moments that say a lot. But when you're talking about a process, you can't beat video because you actually get to watch the entire process. Um, and the last one that I did, the BTS for Cohesive 10, I got the opportunity to film backstage and also film the setup of the entire event, then shoot the event itself and shoot the red carpet all in video. And I loved being able to hear people's conversations and have a mic ready and hear their excitement, hear the struggles that they have. Because again, it's a production and the audience never sees people like screaming at the top of their lungs in full frustration that they have 2 minutes and something's not ready or someone's not here, you name it, and how they overcome that in a graceful way enough to walk a straight line with the utmost beauty and elegance or fierceness, and then walk back into the belly of the beast. Behind that curtain is not what you see on that red line. For anyone who's ever been to a fashion show, the model walks out, they do a few poses. It's very coordinated and choreographed, and that's pretty. But behind the curtain, if you could imagine an anthill, that's what it looks like back there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I always think like you see the finished product of a photo, beautiful photograph, well composition, but you don't see the hard work, the makeup, and the thought that went behind the location, and what it took to make that really great photo. So I kind of like that. Are you familiar with Anthony Bourdain? I'm a huge fan. Parts Unknown. Did you ever watch that show back in the day? And what I thought was interesting about Anthony was it was food, food and culture. So depending where you're born, you live, a lot of times the food is very intertwined with culture. I think fashion has a lot to do with that, and I love the way Anthony would go around and again get the backstory. You would go to see where people live and the culture behind the food. And going back to what you said with your bridal designer, it is culturally driven a lot of times, or even your other clients you're working with. I think a lot of our culture builds into some of that with fashion. So going back earlier, as far as do you use LinkedIn? Are you doing any networking to build your clientele, or how do you go about the day-to-day business of building your practice?
I'm very aggressive in the sense that I am not afraid to walk up to anyone. For instance, I was at Soho House recently. A friend invited me to lunch, and I saw these two gentlemen who looked outstanding. And without missing a beat, I just walked up to their table, introduced myself, gave them my business card, big smile on my face, like they were two buddies I had never met yet. And that's my approach to anything. I am not afraid to make posts on any platform. I do use LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok. TikTok is tremendous right now. I have got so many clients and inquiries from that space, and then bleeding over into my Instagram. So if you're a model, photographer, you name it, TikTok is a really great place to be right now.
Yeah, I turned 60 this year, and I'm a guest speaker at UNM sometimes. And it's funny because back in my day, there was no way to do this. I mean, you would have to go get the yellow pages from whatever city. And I mean, imagine how hard it would be to connect, or even what we're doing right now, doing this live stream here or recording and whatnot. And I think there is so much power. You and I think, connected on TikTok.
Yeah.
But it's such a great resource. So any other thoughts or any other advice you'd like to give photographers? We talked a little bit about working with different clients, stuff like that, but any thoughts on that you would like to share with photographers and models and designers?
I'll start with the photographers. there's a lot of pressure oftentimes with fast changing technology, and everyone's got a new filter and a new this, that, and the other to fit the mold of what's already happening. As an artist, as a photographer, we all pretty much have the same tool that comes with some form of lens, shutter speed, ISO, aperture. That's what you're working with. Outside of that, to become a working photographer, I recommend finding something that you like to do, that you can replicate effortlessly and pitch it as a product. And I put it like that because anyone could shoot in any different style, but when you show up to work as an artist, you want to love what you do. If you go to a painter's gallery, they're not painting other people's work. They're painting what they like to paint. And they've got it down to a science where this is what they're able to create all the time. And they find the people that really love that. So as you're building your craft, don't get too caught up on what you should do. That is the fastest way to become very stagnant in your art. Push boundaries, try things that look quote unquote strange to the normal eye. Oftentimes those are going to be the things that make people go, wow, I would have never thought to do that. That's amazing. And now I want to book you to do that because they don't want to look like everybody else. Now there are times when it's important to act, to have skills that are standardized, like headshots, have some rules. It's good to know them. If you want to pitch that product, make a little extra money on the side, know the formulas for different things, but always be pushing and creating your style because that's what's going to make people gravitate towards you. And that could be one, in the way you shoot, two, in the way that you light things, three, in the way that you interact with people. A lot of my clients book me not just because the photos are good, but I have a way of engaging with clients that leaves them feeling relaxed, vulnerable, and able to express even more outside of what they're used to because I treat everyone like a friend who has a very important purpose in life. That is how I treat everybody who walks into my home, studio I'm working with, on set. Even when I meet celebrities, I half the time personally don't know who they are anyway. So I'm like,
Mhm. That's great.
That's also gotten me in trouble sometimes where they're like, you don't know who I am. And I just kind of ignore them and go, you're friends.
Yes. I like that.
To models, really understand that what you're doing is a craft and there's a business aspect to it. And you should have a basic understanding of things like basic contracts, understanding how to be prompt and well kept. You should have a pretty well developed skin and hair care routine. And that doesn't mean that you need to be stick thin and have no blemishes or what have you, but you want to show up consistent so people know what they're getting into. One of the biggest pet peeves for most productions is you send in this photo and show up looking completely different, and then the photographer has to do a ton of retouching and this, that, and the other, and everyone's blindsided. So you truly want to represent in every image that you take, in the posts that you make, who you are. So when you show up with confidence, people can say, that's what we brought in. That's the person we brought in, and we're excited about it. For everyone else in the industry, from the grips to the production team, you name it, remember that there's room for everybody if you're doing something unique. If you're fighting for someone else's dream, you will find the world limited. If you are creating a lane that you're excited about, there are infinite possibilities for what you can create, how much money you can make, and the physical places that you can go. I have been able to travel all around the world doing this, from not knowing how to use a camera to picking one up, learning it, and having people fly me out dang near wherever I want to go. My favorite was Switzerland so far. And then I got a week-long stay after that in my client's home, and they paid for my food. Like, whatever you want, you can have.
Very cool. So I was going to ask you what your favorite shoot was. So it sounds like it was Switzerland. What would you say would be your most challenging situation you ever had on set?
The most challenging situation that I've ever had on set. I would say there was the producer of a television show who I had been warned was very difficult to work with. they had a tendency to yell at their staff. The moment they got frustrated, they would shut down very easily, and they were very stuck in their concerns. And a lot of that shoot was going poorly because they were so irritated by every little thing going on around them that they weren't present for the shoot. They were making these awful expressions. And I found myself in a position where I saw a human being who was struggling with this idea of control. And they really couldn't let it go enough to express. And it was very clear that their way of controlling was to be domineering. Now, as a photographer, I have a job to do, and I can take two approaches in this situation. I chose one of these two. One approach is I'm just here to do my job. I'm not going to rock the boat. They hired me to click and light, and if you look ugly while I click and light, that's on you.
Yeah.
Is seeing someone who was really suffering and didn't know how to relax when honestly everything was going well. They had a very responsive team. Any request they made, no matter how they said it, the team was willing to support them. So I actually stopped the shoot entirely and I called a powwow with the team and noted what wasn't working. I was like, okay, we need to handle these things, blah, 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 blah. I understand that this is happening. And then I told the client, I see you trying to create the best case scenario. Perhaps the way that you're going about it is causing stress for you and your team. And I just want to point out that you have one of the most responsive, supportive, and intelligent teams that you could ask for. And everything that you ask for, they're on it immediately. But the stress that you're carrying is making it hard for you to emote. It's making it hard for you to really see and appreciate what's going on around you. And I'd like to ask you, trust your team, trust me, and be the talent for a moment. And know that there's this bustling city around you that's keeping the engine going and making sure that you can do what you need to do. And if there's anything that isn't getting addressed, simply speak it and they will take care of it. But don't add the stress that comes with it because the fear is driving you. She starts crying and she's like, I don't think I've had anybody stop me like that. And you're so right. I was terrified. I'm like, I'm going to lose my fucking job. I'm going to say this and she's going to go, F you, dude. Who are you to talk to me like this? Thank God it worked out. But that was one of the most uncomfortable shoots I've ever had. And it fortunately turned out well in the last, I would say, hour, but it was 2 hours of hell. And I guess the moral of that story is sometimes you've really got to trust the value that you bring and be bold in your approach. You're not just doing a job, you're dealing with people and you are a person. And sometimes you have to take the job off and go, hey, let me take care of you or ask people to take care of you because you're a person and we're all just people doing stuff. And we forget that sometimes. We're not robots. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, I do appreciate your time. And like I said, hopefully we'll reconnect or we'll connect in Vegas sometime. When are you going to be out there? You have something going on out there?
Dates are pending.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you, everybody, for tuning into Santa Fe Fashion Week's fashion video podcast. If you'd like to be a guest, please email me at steven.cuomo@yahoo.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.